We've built almost 5,000 houses now. It's been one of the most gratifying and challenging and difficult things we've ever done, physically speaking, because we've gotten steadily older. I was a lot younger when I first started.
He was 56 and fresh out of the White House when he first took up the hammer as a volunteer home builder.
We hope it'll go like this all over the world. We're now building one home each day for poor people in need.
I happen to be a Christian, and it's a practical way to put my religious beliefs into practical use. And this is the best way I know to cross that very difficult chasm between rich people and people that never have had a decent place in which to live. There's a Habitat organization needing some volunteers to raise money or to serve food or to build a house in almost everywhere people live in the United States. Just the idea of volunteerism, where you actually do some work side by side with people in need, has been put on the forefront of people's consciousness through Habitat. And that's a good thing.
Old video there of CNN profiling former President Jimmy Carter and the things he was doing with Habitat for Humanity, building houses continuously for around 40 years now, helping out with that organization there. He's the longest living president that's still around at 98 years old now. Back then it was a few years before. As they broke down things that are happening, news being Jimmy Carter has decided to go into hospice care after many stints at the hospital to be comfortable with family, as his health has been taking some hits lately. So despite his commitment to these types of things, there's always been this general energy around the name Jimmy Carter as weak, disastrous, worst ever, sucker, soft, all these things. And I'm like, man, that was the general thought process, and I just never really knew why. And I guess I didn't look into too many depths, at least until now. But still, the stuff with the working at the for Habitat for Humanity and also building houses went despite no matter what. Remember this? Watch this. Still at 95 years old at the time, after suffering a fall at his home with the stitches and bruising on his face, he was still out there. It was the kind of thing that you saw Jimmy Carter doing. Here's a statement from the Carter Center. They tweeted this out. After a series of short hospital stays, former US President Jimmy Carter today decided to spend his remaining time at home with his family and receive hospice care instead of additional medical intervention. He has the full support of his family and his medical team, and the Carter family asks for privacy during this time. They didn't give specifics of what those hospital stints were about. He's gone through other health issues and survived those and made it through. And it appears that they're at the point now where that hospice care, though. Again, so details of things that have happened. There's a lot to anyone that's in political life. But as we saw things that happened during his presidency, there was things that Jimmy Carter was saying that many people weren't saying around the early 80s, late 70s. Things like this, watch.
Governor Reagan, as a matter of fact, began his political career campaigning around this nation against Medicare. Now we have an opportunity to move toward national health insurance with an emphasis on the prevention of disease, an emphasis on outpatient care, not inpatient care, an emphasis on hospital cost containment to hold down the cost of hospital care for those who are ill, an emphasis on catastrophic health insurance, so that if a family is threatened with being wiped out economically because of a very high medical bill, then the insurance would help pay for it. These are the kind of elements of a national health insurance important to the American people. Governor Reagan, again, typically is against such a proposal.
That was during the debate for the 1980 presidency, which he then lost to Reagan. But was that Jimmy Carter? Was that Bernie Sanders? Again, back in the day saying those types of things. That wasn't it, though. Michael Betschloss tweeted this out. And something else I didn't know. In 1979, Carter had solar panels installed at the White House in 79. These were later laughed at, derided, and removed by officials of the Reagan administration. Solar panels, this guy's crazy. And when he did so, he was saying this could be something that could end up being a development so that we can actually have lower cost energy, or it could turn to a relic, end up in a museum, and just be something of the past. We're somewhere in the middle, I think, hopefully closer to what he was hoping for. But definitely when it comes to things like officially at the White House, it ain't really the thing that's happening. And again, maybe there are some solar panels at the White House and I just don't know about it. But it's definitely not something that's been talked about that much. So outside of just the White House, after that, this is what else he's done. He built a solar farm in his hometown, and it now powers half of the entire city. No, it's not a huge city, but it powers half of it. And the equivalent of them doing it is the equivalent of burning about 3,600 tons of coal. Again, clean energy and cheaper. Here's a little bit on that though. Jimmy Carter was way ahead of the rest of America when he put solar panels in the White House, as we pointed out, in June of '79. And he made this proclamation. In the year 2000, which was 23 years ago, this solar water heater behind me, which is being dedicated today, will still be here supplying cheap, efficient energy. A generation from now, this solar heater can either be a curiosity, a museum piece, an example of a road not taken, or it can be just a small part of one of the greatest and most exciting adventures ever undertaken by the American people. And also, it was the symbolism of the president wanting to bring solar energy immediately into his administration, is what Fred Morse, who's the director of Carter's solar energy program, said. And also, unfortunately though, Reagan, who was no fan of alternative energy, took those panels down, as we pointed out there. So the things, he was a devout Christian. He did Sunday school things. He was the type of person that many Christians say they'd like to be. We don't always see it, and it's not like it's a requirement, but he did walk the walk. Maybe that was the softness part that people were talking about. There was conflicts during his time in office though, Jess. But first, your thoughts after I've reeled off all of this encyclopedia worth of information that probably is tons more to get to.
Yeah, I mean, the Carter administration inherited an absolute mess when it came to foreign policy, right? The Iranian hostage crisis and the operations he took, Desert Claw or whatever, that didn't go so well. Yeah. I think Carter probably had more of a positive impact than a negative one when it came to foreign policy, the way he decided to reduce clandestine operations under the CIA. Unfortunately, also Operation Cyclone happened under his watch. But out of all of the presidents, he's like the least bad of all the bad guys, right? There's no US president that hasn't done anything with a negative impact on the people. But Carter was generally a decent guy, and I don't know what it says about his faith in government after serving as president for him to take matters into his own hands. He's like, you know what? I'm just gonna build the houses myself. I'm just gonna invest in renewable energy myself. It doesn't really bode well for the US government that he didn't take that route to get things done afterwards.
Yeah, and there was other mentions. Here's some of the maybe more questionable things that happened, at least also reasons why he served that one term, and maybe some of the weakness and arrogance comes from in the way they're talking about, which he started the work with building houses after, I believe it was around 82, after he lost his re-election bid. Really fast as we go through this last part, because I want to make sure it's all told. So Carter found his passion in politics, though this is according to NPR talking about his life, serving 2 years in the Georgia State Senate before being elected governor in '70. And after Alter, who wrote a book on him, Jonathan Alter, is sharply critical of Carter's campaign for the State House, writing, while he didn't say anything explicitly racist, he figured out how to appeal to racist voters, a decision he claimed not to regret. Once elected, however, Carter stunned Georgians with his inaugural address in which he stated, "I say to you quite frankly that the time for racial discrimination is over." Sadly, this was a remarkable comment for a Southern governor to make at the time. I guess they thought it was a bit of a bait and switch. A little bit more though, his election as president was marked by a series of unforced errors that nearly cost him the race, including his now famous Playboy interview in which he admitted inexplicably, "I have looked on a lot of women with lust. I've committed adultery in my heart many times." He also said he wouldn't force neighborhoods to be racially integrated, noting again inexplicably, "I see nothing wrong with ethnic purity being maintained." Again, this is back in the '70s, and we see if his actions in his life later also reflected those types of views in his political life. One more part about this. His electoral coalition splintered under double-digit inflation, gasoline lines, and the 444-day hostage crisis in Iran. His bleakest hour came when 8 Americans died in a failed hostage rescue in April of '80, helping to ensure that landslide defeat to Reagan. And maybe those things are the ones that people have issues with, which you can. Understood. But I think a lot of times people don't dive into the details and background and history of the things that happened around him before they come to the conclusions that they do. But
yeah, I think it says a lot about our country that this guy was like, I support ethnic purity, and I've cheated on my wife in my brain, and I've been responsible for the death of Americans abroad, and we armed and trained the Mujahideen that became the Taliban in Afghanistan, and we're like, this guy is the best president of all presidents. Like, it says more about America than it does about Jimmy Carter.
Yeah, and if those are the bad things, maybe we should have reversed them, but we just kept down dangerous paths, and I'm not sure if the situation has gotten better in those areas that we continue to affect.